She came in out of the rain, soaked, silent, 6 years old. No parents, no words, just a little brass music box held against her chest. So the cook did the only thing she knew how to do. She fed her a warm bowl, a piece of cornbread, and the first almost smile that child had shown in months. Then the girl went still. Outside, 3 black cars rolled to a stop in the dark, and whoever was inside them had come looking for her. A billionaire filled the doorway. He knelt down to his daughter, and she raised one small hand and pointed straight at the woman who fed her. The girl didn't ring the little bell over the door the way customers did. She pushed it open with both hands, slipped in out of the rain, and stood there tiny, soaked, perfectly still like she'd walked farther than her legs were built for, and had finally decided this was far enough. Imani Clark looked up from the pass. She'd been in Seoul long enough to stop being surprised by most things. A teaching contract that dissolved 3 weeks after she landed, a city that moved like a river and waited for no one. A grandmother's recipes she cooked every night in a stranger's kitchen because it was the only prayer she still knew how to say, but she'd never seen anything quite like this. The girl was maybe 6, a private school pinafore too crisp for this basement diner in Haebangchon, and a small brass music box held to her chest with both arms like it was the one weight keeping her tied to the earth. Her eyes moved across the little room, the mismatched stools, the steam, the chalkboard menu with the quiet seriousness of an inspector. Not scared, not lost, just watching. Taking inventory, deciding. Imani set down her towel. "Hey." The girl looked at her but said nothing. "You hungry?" A pause long enough that Imani thought she might turn and go. Then one careful nod. Imani pulled out the end stool and tipped her head toward it. The girl crossed the room without hesitation, set the music box on the counter facing her like a small chaperone, and sat with both hands folded, like she was here for a meeting. Imani almost smiled. She ladled warm barley tea into a cup and set it down. The girl drank, then mouthed something, no sound, just the shape of the words. "Thank you," Imani answered in Korean, easy and unhurried, and the girl's eyebrows lifted a fraction. She got that look sometimes, the one that said, "You're not what I expected," and had learned to take it as a compliment. She filled a small bowl from the pot she'd had going since noon, chicken and okra and rice, thick and dark and steaming, set it in front of the girl, and laid a square of warm cornbread beside it. Her nightly special, a recipe that lived somewhere between her grandmother's kitchen off Claiborne Avenue and this cramped Seoul basement. Then she went back to wiping down the pass like the child had been coming here for years. No fuss, no questions, just food, set down in front of a hungry kid. The girl looked at the bowl, then at Imani, then picked up the spoon and ate. In the back corner, old Grandmother Bay, 73, owner of this place, the closest thing to family Imani had on this side of the world, stirred from her doze. She opened one eye, spotted the girl, shuffled over, and set a small dish of sweet pickled radish beside the cornbread without a word, then shuffled back and closed her eye again. The girl watched the old woman's back. Something in her posture eased. Her shoulders came down. Whatever weight 6 years old was not built to carry loosened, just slightly, in this small, warm room that smelled like broth and rain and toasted cornmeal. This place was safe. She didn't know how she knew. She just knew. They sat in easy, quiet rain on the high little window, Grandmother Bay's soft breathing, the low tick of the cooling stove. Imani found herself teaching the girl English without meaning to. She tapped the pot. Simmer. It meant leaving something low and patient on the heat until it turned into more than the sum of what you'd put in if you didn't rush it. The girl's lips shaped it back, careful and silent. Simmer. Exactly. The corner of the girl's mouth moved, not quite a smile, but close enough that Imani filed it away like something valuable. She noticed the pinafore now, the fine stitching, the small embroidered crest on the pocket, the little leather shoes, without a single scuff. This child was not from this neighborhood. Imani said nothing, just refilled the cup. The girl had eaten most of the bowl and was pointing at the chalkboard, silently asking the names of things. When her eyes drifted to the stairwell window and stayed, Imani followed her gaze. 3 black cars had stopped at the top of the alley, identical, polished, the kind that did not belong on a lane this old. The girl went still. Both arms closed around the music box again, and something behind her eyes went very quiet, the way things go quiet right before something happens, like she'd known this moment was coming, like she'd hoped it wouldn't. The door opened, and Imani Clark's entire understanding of the evening changed forever. The man who came down the stairs was not loud. He didn't need to be. Tall, broad through the shoulders, a charcoal coat that probably cost more than a year of Imani's rent. His face was angular and absolutely still, the kind of still that doesn't come from peace, but from years of deciding that showing nothing was safer than showing anything. His eyes crossed the room the way a camera sweeps a space, fast, precise, missing nothing. 2 men came in behind him and set themselves at the door and the foot of the stairs. The temperature seemed to drop. Old Mr. Yun, who ate the same bowl of soup at the same table every night for 9 years, folded his newspaper and went still. Imani didn't move. She stood behind the counter and watched this man fill the doorway of her small, worn diner like he'd walked in from another world. Because he had. His gaze swept the room once, twice, and found the girl. For one single second, one fraction of a moment, Imani almost missed something crossed his face that had nothing to do with money or power. Relief. Gone as fast as it came. He crossed the floor, crouched to the girl's level, and spoke low, meant for no one else. The girl didn't answer with words. She lifted one hand and pointed directly at Imani. The man straightened, turned, and looked at her. Imani looked right back. She had no idea who he was. All she had was instinct, and every instinct she owned was firing at once. She held his gaze anyway. He reached into his coat and set an envelope on the counter between them. It made no sound, but it landed with weight. Imani didn't touch it. For a moment, neither of them moved. The room was so quiet she could hear the rain running down the stairwell. Then he took the girl's hand, turned, and walked out. No explanation, no introduction. Just the envelope on the counter, the door swinging shut, and the 3 black cars pulling out of the alley like they'd never been there. The silence they left behind was enormous. Mr. Yun picked up his paper with hands that weren't steady. Grandmother Bay hadn't moved, but her eyes were fixed on Imani with something close to fear. If your chest is already tight, do me a favor and tap that subscribe button, because I promise you, we are only getting started. Imani stared at the envelope, then the door, then Grandmother Bay. The old woman let the silence breathe, the way she always did. Then, quietly, that was Cha Do-yoon. The name meant nothing, and Imani said so. Grandmother Bay looked at her steadily. Everyone in this city knows that name, child. They just know better than to say it too loud. Something in how plainly she said it, not dramatic, just factual. Like reading a forecast made the alarm in Imani's chest ring louder. She picked up the envelope, opened it. The amount inside made her set it down, pick it up, and set it down again. Who is he? Grandmother Bay was quiet a moment. Then, slowly, the kind of man whose daughter you do not want to be the last person to have seen. That night, Imani sat at her small table, laptop open, envelope beside it, the rain still going. She typed the name. The results loaded. She read them, closed the laptop, sat in the dark a while, then opened it again. The Cha family. 3 generations. Old steel and shipping money braided so tightly with things nobody spoke of that no one had ever pulled the 2 apart. A conglomerate that didn't make headlines because it decided who wrote them. Cha Do-yoon had taken the chair at 32 and, in 8 years, gathered more than his father had in 20. Feared. Untouchable. Patient in a way more dangerous than temper. Widower. 1 daughter. She closed the laptop and thought about the girl's arms around that little brass box, the way she'd held it, like an anchor, the way her shoulders had come down in that small, warm room like she'd been waiting a long time to put something heavy on the floor, the almost smile, simmer, shaped silently and precise. Imani sat in the dark a long time. 3 days passed. Life at the diner went on the way it always did, but she kept glancing at the end stool. at the little scuff the girl's shoe had left on the footrest. She called her sister on the second night. Nia was back home in New Orleans and answered already mid-sentence. Hold on, a door closing. Then, okay, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Why is it gotta be something? Because you got a voice for when everything's fine and a voice for when you're about to tell me something I don't want to hear. That's the second one. The envelope still sat on the kitchen table, a question she wasn't ready to answer. A little girl came into the shop 3 days ago, she said. Maybe 6. By herself. I fed her. Okay. Her father came to get her. A pause. Okay. Nia. Her father is Cha Do-yoon. The pause this time had texture and weight. Imani. I know. You fed Cha Do-yoon's baby girl. I didn't know who he was. She was just a wet little thing who came down my stairs looking like she hadn't taken a full breath in months. How much was in that envelope? Imani told her. Nia made a sound that wasn't quite a word. I didn't take it, Imani said. It's still on my table. Good. Don't touch it. Don't call anybody. Let it be a strange Tuesday you never think about again. Imani said nothing. Imani, I'm not doing anything. You got the voice. Promise me you'll leave it alone. She promised. She wasn't entirely sure she meant it. The 4th day was a Thursday. Imani was doing closing prep when the bell over the door rang. She raised a hand without looking up. We're closed. Kept wiping. Miss Clark. The voice was calm, measured the kind that had never raised itself because it had never needed to. She looked up. The man at the foot of the stairs was not Cha Do-yoon. Younger, softer at the edges, immaculate in a pale gray suit without a single wrinkle, and an expression of such perfect pleasantness that the back of her neck prickled. He had the look of a man who was always the most reasonable person in the room, right up until he wasn't. My name is Han Jin-woo, he said. I ran security for Mr. Cha's late wife. Now I look after what matters to the family. Imani set down her towel. We're closed. I won't take much of your time. He crossed to the counter and laid a folder on it. Thick, cream-colored, no label. Mr. Cha would like to make you an offer. Imani looked at the folder, didn't touch it. Yuna, Jinwoo went on, has not stopped signing your name since Thursday. She drew the bowl you gave her 11 times. This is notable because Yuna has not spoken a word aloud in over 2 years. A brief pause. Not since her mother. That landed somewhere under Imani's ribs and stayed. Mr. Cha is proposing a formal arrangement. You would relocate to the residence as cook and companion to Yuna, her meals, her days, her English, her voice, if it ever chooses to come back. Full room and board, a generous salary, another pause, and protection, for you and for the people you care about. That last part landed differently, not a threat. Just a fact, stated the way you'd mention rain coming. I already have a kitchen, Imani said. The corner of Jinwoo's mouth moved. He's aware. He isn't looking for a cook, a beat. He's looking for whatever it is you are. I'll think about it, Imani said. Jinwoo nodded once, left the folder, and walked out. She sat with Grandmother Bay that evening at the little back table after closing, tea between them, the folder on the counter where Jinwoo had left it. The old woman looked at it once, then at Imani, then back at her tea. You already know what's in it, she said. I know what he told me. Then you already know what you're going to do. It's dangerous. Harmony. Yes. That world is dangerous. Yes. She set down her cup. Imani. That baby came in here. Out of all of Seoul, all the doors she could have pushed open, she pushed this one. She sat on that stool. She ate your food. And she pointed at you in front of a man who frightens grown men. She didn't even speak. For that child, Grandmother Bay said quietly, pointing is a whole sentence. Pointing is a scream. Imani looked at the stool, at the little scuff on the footrest. Children, Grandmother Bay said, lifting her tea. No things grown folks spend years forgetting how to feel. The diner was quiet. Rain again, soft on the little window. Imani thought about the girl's eyes, the almost smile, simmer, shaped in silence. She got up, crossed to the counter, opened the folder, read it, closed it. She called. Nia at 11 that night. Nia answered instantly, skipped hello, went straight to, Imani, what did you do? Nothing. Yet. Yet? I'm thinking about taking it. Imani, you should have seen her. Her voice came out quieter than she meant it to. She sat at that counter, so tired, like she'd been holding her breath so long she forgot air was free. She's a baby. Nia was silent a long moment. I know what a little girl like that has probably lived through. That's exactly why I'm scared for you. I know it's not simple. Do you? I'm from the Ninth Ward. Nia, I know complicated. A beat. Then a small exhale that was almost a laugh. Then be careful. Call me every day. Every day. And, Imani, don't let them turn you into something you're not. Imani looked at her reflection in the dark, rain-streaked window, her face breaking apart and reforming with the water running down the glass. They won't, she said. She almost believed it. The next morning she packed one bag. Practical clothes, her grandmother's spice tin, old blends in twists of brown paper, a wooden spoon worn pale and smooth at the edge, a folded index card in her grandmother's own slanting hand. A chipped enamel mug the color of river mud from a standoff Claiborne Avenue that she'd carried across an ocean for reasons she couldn't fully explain. Grandmother Bay was already in the kitchen. She wrapped a box of cornbread for the road without being asked and pressed it into Imani's hands. Imani hugged her, held on a beat longer than usual. The old woman patted her back twice. Steady, solid. Sunday, she said. You come back. Every Sunday, Imani said. The black car was waiting at the top of the alley. Two men she didn't know, courteous and silent, who held the door and said nothing. As the car pulled out of Haebangchon, Imani watched the little diner's stairwell shrink through the rear window, the faded sign, the fogged glass, the crooked lane she'd learned by feel over 2 years of wrong turns. Then she faced forward. She had no idea what she was walking into, but underneath all the fear, underneath the reasonable voice in her head that sounded exactly like Nia saying, please don't do this, she felt something dangerously close to where she was supposed to be. The residence did not look like danger. That was the first thing she noticed. She'd braced for something dark and fortress-like. High walls, iron, the architecture of a man with enemies. And yes, there were guards, more than she could count in one sweep, and cameras tucked into every eave. But the place itself, up in the wooded hills below Bukhansan with the whole valley of the city spread out gray and glittering beneath it, was beautiful. Old hanok wood and new glass, a long reflecting pool, a kitchen garden gone slightly wild at the edges like nobody had the heart to tend it. Imani looked at that garden a long time. She thought about the girl who'd grown up here, about what it meant to grow up somewhere beautiful and airless at the same time. Mrs. Seo met her at the door, maybe 60, impeccably dressed, with the posture of a woman who ironed her own spine every morning. She walked Imani through the residence in measured steps and clipped, precise Korean that left no room for questions. The rules: no West Wing under any circumstances, no wandering the grounds after dark, a security escort required outdoors, access limited to the kitchen, Yuna's wing, the informal dining room, the kitchen garden, and her own room. And Mr. Cha? Imani asked. Mrs. Seo looked at her. Mr. Cha will make himself available when he chooses to, which told her everything and nothing. Her room was large and immaculate, a window over the trees and the city beyond. She set her grandmother's spice tin on the desk, put the enamel mug on the nightstand, a smudge of warm brown against all that pale wood and white linen. She sat on the edge of the bed and breathed. Okay, Imani, okay. She'd been in the room maybe 10 minutes when she felt it. Not a knock, more like presence, that quality of silence that means someone is standing on the other side of a door, deciding something. She opened it. Yuna was in the hallway, music box under one arm. She'd clearly prepared for this. She held up a small folded card, both hands, and turned it so Imani could see. On it, in careful crayon, a brown bowl with steam curling up, and beneath it, in shaky block letters, an adult must have helped her spell. Simmer. Imani felt her throat close and her heart crack open in the same second. She crouched. You remembered. Yuna nodded, hard, once. Then she pointed down the hall, toward wherever the kitchen was, and looked at Imani with a question so plain it needed no sound. Yeah, Imani said, standing, wiping her eyes with the heel of her hand and laughing at herself for it. Come on then, let's go find that kitchen. The kitchen became their world. It happened gradually, and then, all at once, the way most important things do. The first evening they made cornbread together, Yuna on a step stool, watching Imani's hands with the focus of a student who took every subject seriously. The third day, the girl was waiting at the kitchen door before Imani arrived, ingredients already lined up in the order she wanted them. Imani taught her English through the cooking. Stir, taste, season, rest, simmer, always coming back to simmer, the word that had started it all. Yuna couldn't say them aloud, not yet, but she wrote each one in a small notebook with the same seriousness, and she began leaving small drawings outside Imani's door every morning. One bowl, then two, then a whole small stack Imani lined up along the windowsill until the room felt like hers. Yuna started making sounds again in small, private ways, a hum under her breath while she stirred, a short laugh, quickly swallowed, when the cornbread rose lopsided. One morning, Imani watched her tap a young kitchen worker on the sleeve, hold up a card, and mouth a whole word taste and watch the woman's face register quiet astonishment. One afternoon in the garden, under the patient watch of their escort, Yuna wrote in her notebook and turned it around. Why did you come to Korea? Imani told her the truth. The teaching job, the plan falling apart. Staying anyway, because going home felt like admitting something she wasn't ready to admit. Yuna thought about this with great seriousness, then wrote, Are you sad it broke? Sometimes, Imani said honestly. The girl was quiet a moment. Then she wrote, slowly, and turned the notebook. I am glad it broke, because then you would not be here. And she went back to pressing a thumbprint into the edge of the dough like she hadn't just cracked Imani's heart wide open and set it back together in the same breath. Like this video, if this little girl just stole your whole heart. Stay with me, this is right where the father walks in. Cha Do-yoon was a presence more than a person for the first 2 weeks. He was there in the rooms, at the dinner table, where he sat across from Yuna, and they ate in a silence so heavy with everything unsaid that Imani had to concentrate on her plate to keep from speaking into it. He always left first. He acknowledged Imani with a nod, precise, polite, impenetrable, like she was a chair placed correctly and doing its job. She told herself that was fine. She wasn't there for him. But one evening, just after 7, when Yuna was in bed and the house had gone still, Imani was in the kitchen working through her grandmother's tin, trying to coax a proper pot of red beans out of Korean ingredients and stubbornness. She was talking to herself the way she always did when she cooked alone. Low and slow, she murmured to the pot. You rush it. It turns to mush. You just have to let it come together. She felt the quality of the silence in the doorway change. She looked up. Cha Do-yoon stood there, jacket gone, sleeves pushed up, and an expression she hadn't seen before, not the stone of the diner, not the blankness of the dinner table, but something quieter. Like a man standing outside a lit window on a cold night, looking in at something he'd forgotten he was allowed to want. Their eyes met. Imani held his gaze. Something moved across his face, brief, contained, gone before she could name it. He turned and walked away. Imani looked back at the pot and kept stirring, but her hands weren't steady, and the kitchen felt 3 degrees warmer than it had a minute before. He appeared in the doorway twice more that week. Never came in, never announced himself, just stopped, watched, left. The second time, Imani was teaching Yuna to crack an egg one-handed. She didn't look up. Don't squeeze it, she told the girl gently. You're not fighting it. You're just asking it to open. From the doorway. Nothing. Then, absence. Yuna glanced at the empty doorway, then at Imani, with a look far too knowing for 6. Imani raised an eyebrow. The girl pressed her lips together, fighting a smile, and looked back at her egg. The third time, Imani was alone on the phone with Nia, leaning on the counter, laughing at something, completely unguarded. She turned and saw him, and the laugh didn't stop all at once. It tapered the way a song ends, rather than the way a needle scratches. He looked at her, at the tray cooling on the counter. What is that? Cornbread. My grandmother's. A beet. You want some? The question surprised him. She saw it, a fractional widening of the eyes, quickly managed, like it had slipped through a gap in his composure before he could close it. No, he said, and left. Imani put the phone back to her ear. Nia's voice. Was that? Don't. Imani said. I didn't say a word. A beat. Imani. Nia. I'm serious. Nia said nothing at all, but she was smiling. Imani could hear it. The nightmare came on a Wednesday. Imani had been asleep maybe 2 hours when something pulled her out of it, not a sound, more the absence of one. She got up, pulled on a cardigan, and opened her door. Yuna was sitting against the wall directly across from her room, knees pulled to her chest, music box crushed against them. Her eyes were open and dry, but her face had that particular blankness Imani recognized at once, because she'd worn it herself, at certain points in her life. The face of a person who has surfaced from something terrible and is waiting for her heart to slow enough to trust she's safe. She wasn't crying. Somehow, that made it worse. Imani didn't ask what she'd dreamed, didn't ask if she was okay. She sat down beside her on the floor, back against the wall, shoulder close to the girl's, knees up the same way, and let the silence be what it was for a while. Then she started, low, to hum a slow, rolling tune her father used to play on a battered trumpet on their porch on summer nights, half lullaby, half second line, all warmth. Something about the sound of it in this cold, immaculate corridor felt like a small, deliberate act of heat against everything this house had forgotten how to be. She felt Yuna shift, slowly, carefully, the way you test ice before you trust your weight to it. The girl leaned into her arm. Imani didn't stop humming. After a while, she asked, soft, "Can I do your hair? My grandmother used to do mine when I couldn't sleep. Said you can't hold a bad dream and sit still to be braided at the same time." A pause, then a small nod against her shoulder. Imani turned her gently, took the fine dark hair in sections, and began a slow, loose plait, humming the whole time, her fingers moving in a rhythm older than either of them. She felt the girl's breathing lengthen. She felt the small body go heavy against her. She stayed exactly where she was. Chado Yun found them like that. Mrs. Seo had come to his door with a quiet knock, the way she was trained to on the nights Yuna woke. He'd come down the hall expecting what he always found, his daughter alone against the wall, rigid, unreachable. Instead, he stopped and saw this. Yuna's head tipped against a stranger's arm, a half-finished braid down her back, a low tune moving through the dim hall, his daughter's hands loose in her lap, not gripping, not bracing, just resting. In that moment, watching his daughter breathe against the arm of a woman from New Orleans who had sat down on the floor without being asked and started humming without being told. Cha Do-yoon's face was not composed at all, not frightening, not powerful. Just a father, a tired, grieving father, watching someone give his child something he had not known how to give her. Not resentment. Something more honest, that lived between gratitude and grief and had no clean name. He turned quietly and went back to his room. He did not sleep for a long time. The next morning, Imani was making coffee when she felt the shift in the air that meant he was there. She reached for a second mug without turning around. He sat at the kitchen island and said nothing. She set the coffee in front of him, leaned against the counter with her own, and looked out at the trees, gray morning, mist low in the valley, the city waking slowly below. The silence between them was different from all the silences before it, less armored, like something had been set down overnight, and neither of them had picked it back up. "What was that song?" he said. Not the formal voice, something underneath it, awake since 2 in the morning. She told him the porch, her father, the trumpet, the way certain sounds feel like home even 8,000 miles from it. He listened with his whole body, completely present. Her mother, he said eventually, to his cup, not to her, painted. She used to paint while Yuna fell asleep on the studio floor. The last thing she was working on is still on the easel. I haven't been able to move it. The weight of that sentence sat between them like something physical. Imani felt it land and didn't try to soften it. I didn't know, she said quietly. I know you didn't. He stood, picked up his cup, paused. She drew you, he said, still to the middle distance. The family picture her school asked for. 3 people at a table, 3 bowls, a beat. You were the one holding the pot. He set his cup in the sink and walked out. Imani stood in the kitchen with both hands around her mug and the feeling of 3 people at a table sitting in her chest like something she didn't have a word for yet. A tall man, a small, silent girl, and a woman with a pot in her hands already inside the picture before she'd ever said yes. She noticed the change in the residence on a Monday. Subtle at first, the way important things always are before they aren't. More guards at the perimeter. Conversations that stopped a beat too quickly when she entered a room. Han Jin-woo moving through the halls with a new urgency, his pleasant expression exactly the same as always, which somehow made it worse. Cha Do-yoon disappeared for a day and a half. Imani kept Yuna's world warm and ordinary, while she watched the guards double and tried to name the tension that had settled over the residence like weather rolling in off the mountains. She watched Jin-woo. Something about him had always sat at the edge of her instincts, like a splinter. She couldn't find that perfect pleasantness, that immaculate calm. But it was more than that now. It was the way he looked at her sometimes in passing, a glance that lasted a fraction too long, an assessment that had nothing to do with whether she was doing her job, like a man studying something he hadn't yet decided what to do with. She said nothing, kept watching. It was a Thursday afternoon when she took the wrong turn. She'd been looking for Yuna, who had slipped away from their lesson early, and was moving through a corridor she rarely used when she heard the voices low, tense, behind the closed door of Cha Do-yoon's study. She should have kept walking, but she caught the word woman, said in a tone that stopped her feet before her brain caught up. She stood and listened. Do-yoon's voice, controlled, but with something underneath it she'd never heard there before, barely managed fury, and Jin-woo's voice, calm, measured. That same perfect pleasantness she understood now, in this moment, was not pleasantness at all, but the most disciplined kind of cold. Fragments through the door. The Beck group is moving faster than we planned. COR's accident. It was not an accident. Do-yoon. Flat. Absolute. No, Jinwoo said. It was not. Someone gave them her route that night. Someone in this house knew exactly which road she'd take, and when. Imani stopped breathing. We're close to knowing who. How close? Close enough that certain people may get nervous, may feel the need to move before we get there. Then we move first. A pause. There is also the matter of the woman. She may have heard something she should not have. I am not yet certain how much. Imani's blood went cold. She backed away 1 step, 2, 3, slow and careful, heel to toe. Her sleeve caught a slim ceramic vase on the hallway shelf. It wobbled. Time slowed the way it does in the moments that matter. She watched it tip, reached, caught it with both hands a half second before it hit the floor. The sound it made against her palms was not loud, but in that corridor, in that silence, it was enough. The voices inside stopped. Footsteps crossing to the door. It opened. Cha Do-yoon stepped out and found her in the corridor, vase in both hands, unable to move, looking at him with an expression she had no control over. Miss Clark, I was looking for Yuna. Her voice came out steady. She had no idea how. Yuna is in the sunroom. A pause with no bottom to it. Everything she had heard. Everything he knew she had heard. Everything neither of them was going to say right now, with Jinwoo standing just inside the door and the whole weight of this house pressing down on both of them. Go to her. She held his gaze. 1 second. 2. And, Miss Clark. His eyes dropped to the vase in her hands. Put that down before you break it. She set it back on the shelf, turned, and walked down the corridor. Steady steps. She did not run. Around the corner, out of sight, she pressed her back to the wall and exhaled like she'd been underwater 3 minutes and had just broken the surface. Her hands were shaking. She made them stop. Then she went to find Yuna. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark and ran through what she knew. Seo Ah, Yuna's mother, had been murdered, dressed up as an accident on a mountain road. Someone inside this residence had helped, and that someone was still here, still walking these halls like they belonged. She thought about Yuna asleep down the hall, the little drawings on the windowsill, the way the girl wrote Simmer like it was a word worth keeping forever. Imani was not going anywhere. The strange thing started 2 days later. Her door left open when she'd closed it. Her phone moved on the desk just enough that she knew. A window latch she always checked found unlocked. Her spice tin set back an inch from where she always left it. She said nothing, kept paying attention, sharper and quieter, now keeping your eyes in the back of your head. Baby, her grandmother would have called it. The picture assembled itself slowly, then all at once. The calls Jinwoo took facing walls. The path he walked through the residence, not the most efficient one, but the one that took him past every camera, like a man who had helped place them, like a man who'd been feeding this house to its enemies for a very long time. Then one morning she reached for her grandmother's spice tin and found a folded note inside it, resting on top of the paper twists. Under the worn wooden spoon, she went very still, unfolded it. Some pots are better left off the fire. You seem clever enough to know that. She read it twice, set it on the desk. She was scared. Genuinely, completely scared. In a way she'd been managing for days, and that this small folded note had just made impossible to hold in any longer. She was also, and this was the New Orleans in her, the part raised on stories of women who'd faced worse and set their jaw and kept moving deeply, quietly furious. Nobody puts notes in her grandmother's tin, the one thing she'd carried across an ocean. Nobody. She picked it up, got dressed, walked to Cha Do-yoon's study, knocked once, opened the door before he answered. He was at his desk, looked up. Whatever he'd been about to say died when he saw her face. She crossed the room and placed the note on his desk, said nothing. He read it. And she watched his stillness become a completely different kind of stillness, not composure, but something beneath it, something with heat in it, something moving through him like a current with nowhere to go. He looked up at her. You came to me. Somebody in your house put that inside my grandmother's tin, in my room, on my desk. Her voice was even. Where else would I go? He held her gaze a long moment. Sit down, Miss Clark. She sat, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Cha Do-yoon talked to her, really talked. He told her about Jinwoo, the suspicion building piece by piece, the man who had run his late wife's security, the man who had wept at her funeral, the man who had known every road she ever drove. Her note, the final piece, that he knew now what had to be done. Then you were never in as much danger as you could have been, he said. She waited, because I have been watching. Since the diner. Since the diner, she repeated. Since my daughter pointed at you. His voice was even, factual. But it cost him something. She could see it in the tension along his jaw, in the way his eyes stayed on hers, like he'd decided to say this and was going to finish it. I needed to know who you were, what you wanted, whether you were. He stopped. Safe, Imani said quietly. Yes. And a beat. Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, not quite softness, but the place where both of those things live before they're allowed to exist. You sat on the floor of my corridor at 2 a.m, he said, and braided my daughter's hair, and hummed her to sleep. She hasn't let anyone touch her hair since her mother. He looked at his desk, then back at her. I know who you are, Miss Clark. The silence after that was entirely different from every silence that had come before it. Han Jin-woo was gone from the residence by nightfall. Imani didn't ask how. Do-yoon didn't offer details. Some things in this world happen the way weather happens. You don't need to understand the mechanics to know the storm has passed. The residents exhaled. The guards eased a fraction. Mrs. Seo passed Imani in the corridor that evening and looked at her, not warmly, not with approval, exactly, but with something she had never directed at her before, acknowledgement. The look of a woman who has reassessed something and is not yet ready to say so out loud. Imani took it. That evening, all three of them sat at the dinner table together, and it was different from every dinner before it. Du Yoon didn't leave early. He sat across from Yuna and he stayed, present in a way he hadn't been, less armored, less managed, like he'd set something down that afternoon and hadn't picked it back up. Yuna wrote almost the whole meal, sliding cards across the table, an opinion about the soup, a question about New Orleans, a theory about why tonight's cornbread was better than last week's, delivered with the confidence of a professional critic. And then, in the middle of it, over the quiet clink of spoons, she opened her mouth, and out came one small, rusty, unpracticed word, the first she'd spoken aloud in over 2 years. Simmer. Just that. No context. Like it had floated up to the surface of her and she'd finally let it out. The table went absolutely still. Imani looked at her. Cha Do-yoon looked at his daughter like the ground had moved. And then Imani laughed, that big, unguarded, wake the dead laugh that bounced off the elegant walls and had no business in a dining room this fine, because if she didn't laugh she was going to weep, and the girl deserved joy, not tears, for a thing that brave. Du-yoon looked at her, and for the first time, barely, briefly, like the sun breaking through for 1 second between clouds, something that was almost a smile crossed his face. Imani looked away, her heart doing something she didn't have a word for yet. Yuna looked between the two of them with those old, too knowing eyes, said nothing more, but her mouth curved, and she went back to her soup like she'd just confirmed something she'd suspected all along. She saw everything. She always had. After Yuna was in bed, the house went quiet. Imani was in the kitchen, not cooking, just there the way she sometimes was at night when thinking was easier, somewhere that smelled like something real. She heard him before she saw him. That shift in the air. She reached for a second mug without thinking. He sat at the island, the city dark and glittering beyond the glass, Seoul breathing on the other side of it. She set the tea in front of him and leaned against the counter with her own, and for a while neither of them said anything, and it was the most comfortable silence she had ever shared with another person in her life. He asked about New Orleans, and she talked, really talked, the way she hadn't with anyone in this city in a long time. Her grandmother's kitchen, the smell of the low river country in August, heavy and green and alive. The food that was more than food, history and memory and love and grief cooked down together into something you could hold in your hands and eat. Why she'd left, why she hadn't gone back. He listened, all the way through. The way she'd noticed he listened to Yuna, like what she was saying mattered. She asked about COR. She hadn't planned to. It just came out. The way things come out when the walls are low and the hour is late and you're sitting across from someone who has stopped pretending. He was quiet a long moment. Then he told her, not everything. She didn't expect everything, but small things. The way Seoa laughed too loud in quiet rooms. The way Yuna had her hands, and her stubbornness, and the exact way she tilted her head when she was thinking hard. The way this house had felt like a held breath for 2 years, and he hadn't known how to exhale it for his daughter. She spoke tonight, he said quietly, to the counter, not quite to her. Yuna, she did, Imani said. Yes. A pause. She did. The kitchen was very quiet. The city hummed below. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. Something moved across his face. Back to the world outside these walls. Back to the war that had been circling this house and was now circling closer, the Beck group, the thing that had killed Seoa. The reckoning that Jinwoo's leaving had only started, not finished. He stood, picked up the call, moved toward the door, stopped in the doorway, looked back at her. Stay inside tonight. She nodded. He held her gaze one long moment, one moment that contained everything neither of them had said and everything both of them knew, and the specific weight of two people standing at the edge of something and deciding not tonight. Not yet, but acknowledging that the edge was there. Then he was gone. Imani sat alone at the island a long time after that. 2 empty mugs. She thought about Yuna's drawing 3 people at a table, 3 bowls, the woman with a pot in her hands already inside the picture before she'd ever agreed to come. She thought about Grandmother Bay's voice. Children know things, grown folks spend years forgetting how to feel. She thought about Nia saying, "Don't let them turn you into something you're not," and the truth underneath it, that the real risk was never that they would change her. The real risk was that she would look up one day and realize she had stopped wanting to leave. She thought about Do Yoon's hand resting near hers on the counter earlier. Not touching, just near. Both of them aware of it. Neither of them moving. Not yet. Outside the walls, Soul hummed and the bake group circled and the real danger hadn't finished arriving. But she was here. She had sat on the floor of a corridor at 2 in the morning and braided a grieving child's hair. She had put a river mud mug on a nightstand in a fortress and called it hers. She had fed a lonely little girl a warm bowl and a square of cornbread and taught her a word about more than cooking, and tonight that word had come back to her out loud. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Outside, the city kept glittering. Grandma always said you can't hurry a good pot, she thought. You stand over it, you stir it, you taste, you trust it. I used to think she was only talking about the gumbo. She smiled, set down her mug, and stayed. If this story moved you, and I think it did, subscribe and turn on notifications, because the story of Imani and Do-yoon is far from over, and the bake group has only just made its first move. Drop a comment and tell me, what was the moment that got you? Was it the little drawings at the door, the braid in the corridor at 2 in the morning, or the moment Yuna finally said, "Simmer" out loud? I read every single one. See you in the next story.